I think you've done something really unique with your utilization of Twitter, X, to score interviews with people like Coleman Samir, Mike Malak, and now you're trying with Ryan Tran. Could you tell them a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I have a Twitter account called tweeting or at Tweet Toot Breakfast, and essentially it's tweeting at certain influencer every day until they let me buy them breakfast. And so technically the first person I ever did was Gary Vee. And so this is a businessman who, he's still pretty popular.
He's big.
He used to, I think, be, I don't want to say more relevant, but just more in the stream. There was a while where Gary Vee was kind of like the pre-Andrew Tate. Now, I don't want to compare the two because they're drastically different. I just mean in how much in their face they would be if you're scrolling through social media or TikTok or some homepage, right? And so I started tweeting at him. So day 1, day 2, day 3, I didn't really think it'd go anywhere. And on day 13, he replied and he said, "Sorry, I'm just too busy right now." And some people were like, "Oh, feel bad for you." I'm like, "Feel bad for me?" He just proved that I can get the attention of someone that much bigger than me. And I'm like, oh, this isn't a loss. This is a huge win. What I'm doing could work. And so I shifted to Casey Neistat, and this is near the height of COVID.
Wait, as you tell this story, with each person, can you mention your follower count? Just because I think it's an interesting
at the time, I mean, probably 0 at Gary Vee.
Really? 0? And 13 tweets any notice?
Yeah, well, it's just because you generate, like, communities that are really well-formed and really caring will support you because they're like, oh, this is cool. And so what would happen is day 1, oh, this is kind of an interesting thing. Day 2, oh, I remember seeing him in the replies earlier. I'm going to like it. Day 3, I'm going to reply, hey, Gary, check this out. So that was what would happen. His community would kind of surround it. And so, I don't know. Before I go on, I didn't know if you had any more questions.
Yeah, sorry to throw you off your flow.
No, that's all right.
I just think it's particularly interesting because I'm really trying to utilize Twitter to get podcast guests right now, and I was partially inspired by your stories. And I wanted to know, like, dude, did this kid have like 5,000 followers? Like, have a team, right?
No.
Damn, so 13 tweets out of nothing is, to me, the interesting part of that is not that people would rally behind you; it's that they would rally behind you, seeing that you have such low followers. Because a lot of times people will put your accountability to your follower count.
Right, and so that's what was kind of difficult starting off. And so to pivot towards Casey Neistat, next person, I have no credibility at this point. I haven't done it with anybody. And I like Casey Neistat. At the time, he was like really, really inspiring for me. And so I started tweeting at him, height of COVID. Casey Neistat has a very, very liberal audience, which isn't a bad thing. But during the height of COVID, what that means is I started getting, I won't call it hate, even though I'm sure it'd be appropriate to, but I get replies to be like, "You're a moron. In the middle of COVID, you'd go outside right now like that. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, read the room." And I'm like, all right, this is not the community to be doing this in right now. Nothing bad. I'm not offended by it. Time to pivot. And so I was reading at the time The Fifth Vital by Mike Malak, who's a much scrappier creator, and as a result, has a more scrappy following that's also pretty loving. So I was like, I'm going to try Mike Malak. So I start tweeting at Malak. That community aspect generates again. I start gaining followers. So they're like, let's see how long. By day 14, someone by the creator of Mel replied to my tweet and said at Mike, like something, I forget what it was, but she said something to Mike. Mike liked her response and replied to her. So I knew Mike had seen it. I was like, okay. And I keep going. And on day 100, I think it was day 100, somebody replies again, and Mike goes, "See, I want to, but like, who is this kid? Or like, is he insane? Like, where is he even from? You know what?" Well, and so I reply, "Mike from Maryland, willing to fly to wherever you are." Right? I plant that. Finally, on day 14 or 114, kind of funny that 14 is the number that keeps coming up. I say it. He goes, "All right, I'm in. Message me the details." So we schedule things up. By the way, the community like surrounding it, like while small, it was insane. Like everybody was like, "Let's go!" Like it's happening, And this is just like,
well, that's cool.
20 to 50 people at the time, right? Nothing crazy, but it still felt pretty awesome. So anyway, I fly out to LA. I'm sitting in a little park that we found that I sent him the address of. And I'm like, I don't know. I've got these cue card questions. I've got questions from Twitter because I wanted to honor that community base. And then I'm like, I don't know if he'll show up. And then he sends me a voice memo. He's like, hey, Josh, about 25 minutes out. And that's when it became real. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah.
And there was really no time to panic because as soon as he showed up, I just saw him. It's like, oh, that's him. Here's a guy that, like, I've been watching for a while now online, almost doesn't seem real, walking towards me. Like, all right, I have to just be cordial now.
Yeah.
And so, I did that interview, and then
I'm a fan of Mike Mayock. So
moving on.
that would be a surreal moment. And I did watch your whole interview. I thought it was very interesting, quite similar to this format.
Yeah, no, it was funny. I had, there were moments in there that were like, amateur moments. One thing I did, one big takeaway, and this isn't against him or anything like that, but I learned, at least for the majority of my videos, I will make sure that some branding of my own is in the shot. I had a clip of him saying, I knew I was going to make it or something. It was this great quote, but I had edited it so it was just his still shot.
Yeah.
Which is great for my video, but then he clipped it, put it on his Instagram. I got like 1 million impressions and 500,000 like total views and watches, and there was nowhere that it said like Joshua Scott interview or tweet to breakfast. I'm like,
damn,
could at least tag. No, but yeah, and
that's interesting.
And then from there, I ended up doing, I think next was FaZe Rug, which is a crazy story, and then Colin and Samir, and right now I've been tweeting Ryan Trahan for a little over a year, and so.
You were having an internal debate whether you should move on or...
Yeah, I actually can check. I put a Twitter poll out today. Because now, to answer the follower question, I've got like 1,015, and I've got like 7 people with tweet notification, at minimum 7 people who get notified every time I do it and instantly like. And then I've got 5 people who are retweeting it every day alongside with me. One guy's at like 72 days of tweeting at Ryan Trahan until he lets at Tweet to Breakfast buy him breakfast, which is like, it's kind of...
That's funny.
It's weird. It's cool. Especially to look back and see where it was from. Like, think of those Casey Neistat days where everybody was like, you're a moron for doing this, and how it shifted. But, it's been a fun journey. It'd be cool if one day it really morphed into something big, but it's never been something that's like got millions of views or anything like that, which is kind of like nice in a way, because it's stayed pretty local. And I don't know.
I'm seeing some pros and cons. To me, the pros are you can bat way out of your league, which is having Mike Mayock as your first guest. He's bigger than any of my 39 guests. Numerically.
Right.
Again, I'm trying to measure people by souls, but for this purpose of this example. But the cons is, and like what you say is, you're not really getting reps. So sometimes you show up, you're interviewing a world-class person, you're like, dude...
Yeah.
Usually people don't get those kind of people till they're 100 episodes in. Or prepared to lay down a good interview, lay down a good studio. And those are the 2 big pros and cons, but I really love the idea. And I think there's a lot to learn from the audience. You should say whatever your thoughts you have on that, but then elaborate on what FaZe Rug did for you, because I think that's a really cool little story.
Yeah, well, no, just touching kind of on the reps thing. There have been moments where it's shown. FaZe Rug interview, I think, is the best interview. Well, I know it's the best interview I've personally done. It helped that he was such a nice guy. We had an hour and a half before to kind of just feel each other. The jitters were gone. I felt like I was hanging out with a friend. And just to kind of add to that point, like, it's nice that it doesn't get the views because... Sometimes I think if it did get the views, it would almost take away from what it is. Because part of the fun of it is I am so small. So the thrill that people that follow and myself get is like, hey, you got him to bite, right? This giant entity, is willing to do this with you, and that's fun. If Tweet to Breakfast gets big, then it's like another podcast that they're like, I should go on, which one day, hopefully it turned into, but I'm appreciating the journey it is right now, because I know that as soon as, like, the day that Twitter account has say it ever gets 100,000 followers, the impressions are easy. Day 1 of tweeting, immediately I've got 1,000 likes, right, in the replies.
Yeah.
And I'm ratioing whoever I'm even tweeting at, right? It almost softens what it is. And so If it even as a project ever gets there, who knows if I run it that long? But it's cool.
I think
It's
another
cool to
thing,
appreciate it as a journey now.
I'm a fan of Mike Mill.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with the story. I'm familiar with what he does. I've sent him cold emails before. She's read and not replied to.
How do you know he's read them?
I have an email tracker.
Oh man.
But I don't know that he's read them.
You know,
Probably,
someone has opened them.
a manager has probably opened it and went, nope.
Yeah.
But I will say, even as a fan, it's a cool experience because it's something that I can see of Mike's that I know most of his other fan base hasn't seen. It's almost like I shared an intimate moment that
With him,
if the interview had a million views, it's cool, but I know that most of his fan base has seen it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is another cool layer of that whole idea.
Yeah. And so to get to the FaZe Rug, I was tweeting at FaZe Rug. I was on day 69 was the first day he acknowledged its existence. He liked the tweet. Funny number, haha. And then I was going. I think on day 69, actually, he DM'd me and he asked me where I was from, where I was based out of. And that was a crazy moment because oh, this might happen. And he's substantially bigger than Mike Malak, right? And so if we're basing it by vanity
that's a really interesting
metrics, right?
thing.
And so I tell him everything like that, and doesn't reply. I said, Maryland. Then on day 99, it's a long weekend from my school. And I had decided to go visit my grandmother up in Massachusetts. And so I get in the car and I'm at a point where I'm not in a good spot. I was surrounded by a ton of people I love and appreciate, but I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I wanted to do YouTube, but I was feeling pretty flat with it. I wasn't very inspired and nothing was coming. I just wasn't sure that's what I wanted to continue doing. I didn't move out to California like my dream kind of was to pursue it. And I felt like I'd trapped myself. And so as I'm driving in the car, no camera, no computer, just my iPad, I finally get to this low moment where I say to myself, I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to do YouTube. I'm just going to, join the system, the corporate life system, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm just going to do the normal 9 to 5, and whatever. Again, not a bad thing, but right now that's not my dream. But I'd given up on the dream. I said, I'm not going to pursue this anymore.
You had a mental quitting moment.
Right. Within 30 seconds, I swear to you, 30 seconds of me going, I'm done. I get a notification and I see it as I'm driving. I'm really like this. I got my Apple Watch and I see FaZe Rug logo. FaZe Rug has sent you a message. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I opened Twitter. He's like, hey, can you be in San Diego tomorrow? And I'm like, driving on I-95 North with no camera or anything. I'm like, oh my God, I can't say no to this.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what am I going to do? I start calling my parents. I'm like, hey, I don't know. I left my camera. Do I turn around and try to go get my camera right now? It's 7 p.m. I'll get my camera by 1, and then I got to figure out where I'm flying out of. What do I do? Do we have the money to do this right now? And finally, after 5 minutes discussing, we were like, yeah, I got a message back. And my mom was like, yeah, we'll ask him, tell him you're driving towards Boston and say you got to look at flights and can try and see if you can make it happen. I was like, okay. And so I'm like, hey, got to look at flights first. I'll be flying out of Boston. I'm driving there right now. And he goes, oh, don't worry about prices or anything. Just tell me where you want to fly out of and I'll book it. Or actually, you book whatever flight you want. Send me a screenshot. I'll Venmo you. And I was like, what? This guy's going to pay to fly me out for an interview I've been asking him to do. And so sure enough, I'm like, well, now I have to go.
Yeah.
I have no excuse not to. So I drive up. I tell my grandmother, I'm like, hey, love you. Need you to drive me to the airport tomorrow. I can't stay here. I've got, this thing to do. And she's fully supportive. I land. I go over and I get these cameras. I rent these cameras and I rent these microphones. And then one thing I do with Tweet to Breakfast is I like giving everybody an interview a T-shirt because I think it's a cool thing that maybe if they network, they're like, I don't expect them ever to really wear the T-shirt. I'm sure one of them is at a Goodwill right now, if not all three. But it's a cool thing to be like, oh, I have that. Oh, you did that. I did that. Yeah. Maybe one day it'll come up in conversation. Well, I didn't have that because I didn't have my computer and that had all my files. And so I had an RA go into my room, unlock my computer, and send me the files to my iPad. I went that same day and got a T-shirt printed So I had everything I needed, and then I made questions. And then after being there the very next day, I woke up, FaZe Rug came and picked me up, and we actually came just right above where we're sitting right now and did that interview. And he ended up I was in a segment of a video. If you want to watch the video, I think it's like Last to Scream wins $10,000. He like did something haunted at SeaWorld. But yeah, he picked me up. We bought breakfast. I was with him for about an hour and a half first, and we just kind of got to know each other. It felt really like I was talking to a friend. And then after that, I mean, it was just such a cordial experience to have with someone. What it taught me was like, if I'm, God willing, if I ever get in that position, I'd like to be able to do something similar, or be humble enough to be able to say, yeah, no, I can pick you up. I can drive us to an interview spot. He even offered to pay for breakfast too. And I was like, no, you can't do that. The whole thing is tweeting at you until I buy you breakfast. But like he read off, I did a giveaway at the time, and he read the giveaway winner. So one of his fans got to hear their name through like me as a channel for it to happen. And so, yeah, it was just so cool. I've never reached out again to him because one thing is like, I don't want to be,
a nuisance.
Yeah, or anything like that. I think that's kind of a detriment to me as a networker, is maybe I could check in. I've never been good at that, but no, I mean, it was just fantastic. He was great, and
I gotta jump in and just...
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, for the viewers, if you know or don't know, this guy has like 20 million views.
Yeah.
He lives in a mansion in San Diego, and it's funny because he makes the type of content where I question, where the target audience is kids. There's really choppy edits, and I question, I'm like, damn, is that like true to you? And I've heard stories, not just from Josh, that this stuff where guy bought Josh's flight, picked him up, hung out with him, drove him to his own interview, paid for his own flight, read his own giveaway, and I'm like, dude, I don't care what he uploads to the internet. That's what I want to be like when I'm right. Big, and that just speaks so much to his character, and it was definitely one of those don't judge a book by its cover moments for me, and it's very cool to...
Yeah, it was great. One of my favorite moments of it was I had a friend who I told we were doing it, and he was like, dude, no way. And then I'm like, well, two. I called my cousin.
Yeah.
I FaceTimed my cousin, and I was like, dude, you got to pick up right now. And he used to watch FaZe Rug all the time. And he picks up, and I was like, here, Sam, someone wants to talk to you. And he goes, yo, what's up, man? And that was my cousin talking, and my favorite was like, what's up, dude? Good to meet you. And they're just like talking for 5 minutes. And then in the car, I FaceTimed another buddy. And so it's just like the willingness to do stuff like that. It's just been really cool.
Wow.
I've seen that guy get hate, and I'll never understand it. I mean, even if you don't like his content, it's like he's a genuinely good guy. And so, yeah.
Dude, that's just a really incredible story.
Yeah. And then the most recent one I did, which to call it recent is unfair because it was over a year and a half now, maybe. I did Colin and Samir, and they were 23 days, I think, and they were great too.
Only 23 days for them to say yes?
Yeah, well, so that's what was kind of helpful is now my pinned tweet shows that I've done it before. And so a creator can reach out to the people I've done, and hopefully they'll be like, oh, no, he's chill.
That's super.
You know what I mean?
Colin and Samir is a really big one because they give you a ton of credibility in the creator's face.
Yeah,
and
I hope so.
I mean, they do. Well, like, they've had everyone on.
They do know a lot of people.
If you interviewed them a year ago, they're already so much more relevant, I feel like. Like, every year, they're in an interesting niche. The niche of Colin and Samir is literally how do you grow as a creator. So them themselves can't be that massive because their audience is creators. But they're probably... It was so silent here for a moment.
I know.
They're probably the biggest creator for creators.
Oh, for sure. And like you can see it just with their brand deals or with how YouTube themselves uses Colin and Samir as icons. I mean, they're so in and they're so down to earth. It was funny. I don't know. It was probably my second best interview, but there were moments where there's a significant age gap between me and them. And so there were times where it came up. I remember one time there was a moment where the iPad wasn't working, And I was trying. Two things happened during that interview that were like, one, the iPad wasn't working to get into the tweets to start reading questions people had submitted on Twitter.
Yeah.
And so I just kept saying, I'm going to look at, I noticed I had said tweets too many times.
Yeah.
And so I was like, getting the tweets on Twitter that people have tweeted at me. I'm getting these tweets from Twitter. Like, I wanted to make sure. And then finally they laughed, right? And I think they did find it funny, but I was like, man, that was tough. I needed to kind of stall for a minute.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that happened was, I don't know a thing about lacrosse. They talk about lacrosse a lot.
Oh.
And they both have played college lacrosse.
I played lacrosse, so that would have been good for me.
Yeah, and so I was like, I'm going to bring up, I think it'd be funny to bring up the lacrosse stats. And, read them off and then just ask them about lacrosse.
That's just hilarious.
And I'm like, I actually have here your lacrosse stats. And immediately they're like, oh, well, we need to caveat this. I had an ACL injury, and I'm like, oh, no, are these bad? Because I had no clue. That's on me. I should have contextualized. And they were great about it. They weren't actually like
And that.
mad or anything. But I remember sitting there to myself like, oh, man, what have I
It's pretty funny.
dug myself into? What kind of hole here? But, yeah, no, they were great. I think their head producer still gave me his business card and said, hey, if you ever want to reach out. And he's been a mentor for me consistently. And so it was just a great experience. And yeah. So
Wow. Do you stay in contact with any of the three?
the producer, you mean of Colin and Samir?
Phase Road.
Sorry, I heard it as Colin and Samir, Chris
Yeah.
Schwar, and
Yeah.
No, because I don't have a good reason to. There is a good reason to. It's because you're networking, right?
Yeah.
But it's tough for me to like say, hey, what's up? You know what I mean? Like the only person I would have felt like that might have been acceptable was FaZe Rug.
Yeah.
But I didn't live out here. I wasn't going to go get lunch with him again or go hang out with him. You know what I mean? And so to message him, maybe I could have messaged him when I said, hey, moved out to San Diego, would love to get a bite to eat. But like, I don't know. And this is something that maybe it's a confidence issue for me. I don't know that that's what my role was from a social standpoint there. I don't want to misrepresent what that was.
Yeah.
Outside of a nice gesture he had for me and, something very kind to do. I felt comfortable with him as a friend there, but the gap in between, I just don't know that it'd be a guy who would be like, hey, let's go get lunch or something like that.
That's interesting.
Now, if I were bigger and there's room for collaborations or I've made more of a name for myself and I wasn't so worried that they'd feel like I was trying to grab onto them for clout like a ton of people do, then yeah, I'd definitely be like, hey, you remember me? Like, let's go. I'd love to chat it up, dive into those relationships a little bit more. But I do worry because of how frequent it is, right? That if I were to reach out, they'd feel like, oh, this kid is just coming back for more clout, more everything. And yeah.